How's it going, everybody? Martha Cross 316 back with another comic book flashback, and we are now looking at the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 33. This issue came out in February of 1966, and as we look at the cover here, we see a helpless Spider-Man, and the title of this is The Final Chapter. This is the final chapter to this three-part storyline that we've been looking at for the past three issues. Spider-Man trying to save his Aunt May. Aunt May has radioactivity in her bloodstream. Spider-Man's trying to get the ISO 36. This is the only way to save Aunt May. But we find out that the ISO 36 is in the hands of Dr. Octopus and his henchmen. And so we find out from last issue that Dr. Octopus is the master planner and that he has an underwater base, and Spider-Man is doing all that he can to get this ISO 36. But we came to find out, and it was a cliffhanger from last issue, that this giant steel beam fell right on Spider-Man and he is trapped, and there is a leak within the building, and within minutes this entire base is going to be flooded. So Spider-Man has so little time left to get this ISO 36 or he is going to drown. Will Spider-Man be able to escape this? Don't go away, because we're about to look at a fantastic story here. So go ahead, give this video a big O like and subscribe if you have not, and let's go ahead and get started. So today we have this written by as Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Artie Simek. We cannot forget those who contributed to this awesome story. And this is perhaps one of the best stories that I've read in the Spider-Man saga. So we start out the issue here. We have Spider-Man trying his best to lift up this steel beam. He is so heavy. He is worn out from fighting Dr. Octopus. Can he lift this thing? He remembers how he is responsible for Uncle Ben's death. And we remember this from Amazing Fantasy 15. And he feels that he will be responsible for Aunt May's death if he cannot get out of this in time to get the ISO 36 to Dr. Connors to test this thing and see if he can find the cure to Aunt May's dire situation. So we see just great courage from Spider-Man. He keeps talking to himself. He says, you know what, no matter what the odds, no matter what the cost, I'll get that serum to Aunt May. We see a lot here where Spider-Man is trying his best to encourage himself that he can do it, that he can get through anything in life if he can just have his heart in it. So that's exactly what we're going to see here. Great storytelling by Stan Lee here. We see that Spider-Man struggles he has to use pretty much all of his strength to lift this thing up. And little by little, we see that Spider-Man is doing it. He's doing it, y'all. Look at it. And as we see this hole, the breach within the wall here is getting bigger and bigger. Water is starting to fall with heavier drops on Spider-Man. But we see that Spider-Man is now to his knees, lifting this steel beam, who probably weighs 2 tons, probably heavier than a car, heavier than a locomotive. He's lifting this thing, and we could just see the power of Spider-Man here. And look at this, a great artwork from Steve Ditko. He throws this thing, and finally Spider-Man is free to retrieve the ISO 36. He picks up the ISO 36, but right when he does it, hell breaks loose. So we see that the water just all at once just comes into this room here where Spider-Man's at. So Spider-Man decides that he needs to just let his body go limp. So he does, and lets the water carry him. And by doing this, he's trying to regain his strength. So Spider-Man does it. He finally gets to the surface, but lo and behold, he has to fight Dr. Octopus's henchman here. So he's not in it without having a little bit of struggle here. So Spider-Man's going to have to tackle all these henchmen before he can get the ISO 36 to Dr. Connors. So that is exactly what we're going to see here. Spider-Man fighting with all that he can. he lets his body go limp still, so this is kind of weird, but he's allowing them to punch him. The punches are not going to hurt Spider-Man that much because these guys are just normal humans. Spider-Man has superpowers, remember, but he's allowing them to punch him so that he can regain his energy. And so finally he gets back to his feet. He still has Aunt May on his mind, and Spider-Man just unleashes these punches on these guys. He's just blinded by fury. He and by the time he comes to his senses here, all these guys are knocked out. So Spider-Man finally, I mean, his legs hurting, he's aching all over. You can just imagine how much energy that took to lift that beam off of him. And so Spider-Man finally arrives to Dr. Connors. He tests the serum, and while Dr. Connors has his back turned, Spider-Man tests his own bloodstream to see that the ISO 36 will work on his blood as well, because this is very important to the cure for Aunt May. And so we see right here that Dr. Connors is like surprised that Spider-Man has his extra blood sample, and he doesn't know where this blood sample came from. But Spider-Man's not going to explain himself. He's in a hurry. I mean, Aunt May has little time left, and so he does his best, and he comes to find out that it works. The deterioration of the blood was instantly checked when the serum was applied. So Spider-Man tells Dr. Connors to call the hospital, that Spider-Man is on his way with the cure. And so Dr. Connors does that. Spider-Man arrives on the scene, and we see right here that they're going to do their very best to test this ISO 36 and perform a transfusion and see if she has a fighting chance. But it's going to take 2 hours. And Spider-Man's like, you know what? I can't stay in this hospital for 2 hours. It's just too much for me. So Spider-Man goes back to the base. He comes to find out that these guys are still knocked out. So Spider-Man takes photos for the Daily Bugle so that he can have some photos for J. Jonah Jameson. And so he calls Frederick Foswell. Remember, Frederick Foswell is one of the reporters for the Daily Bugle. So Foswell says that, you know what, Jameson, I have a scoop that Spider-Man, and he's involved with this whole master planner, and he knows exactly who the master planner is, and his gang's been caught. And, you know, we see the big smile on J. Jonah Jameson's face here. He's like, maybe Spider-Man's been caught. Maybe he's been arrested. But we come to find out that that's not the case. Spider-Man has contacted Frederick Foswell so that he could tell him the news that Dr. Octopus is the master planner, that his men has been caught, and he's just helping Frederick Foswell do his job. And Frederick Foswell, well, you should have told me on the phone. I could have alerted a photographer to come. But lo and behold, we see right here that Spider-Man has been taking snapshots of their discussion here. Spider-Man has his automatic camera set up so that he can get pictures of this entire thing, so that he can give them to J. Jonah Jameson. He gets the men who are unmasking themselves. I mean, these are high quality photos. Jameson's all excited. Peter Parker comes back to the Daily Bugle, and finally we're going to see the conclusion with Betty Brant and Peter Parker with their relationship. Peter Parker turns around and she notices that Peter Parker is bruised up. He's been in a fight. He tells her that, you know, he was out trying to get some photos. He got mixed up with a rough crowd, and this is what he's going to have to do if he's going to continue to do this type of job. And right here we see that Betty Brant comes to the realization that she just cannot love Peter Parker because she remembers how her own brother was killed in action. Remember this. He was killed in action, and she's afraid the same could happen to Peter Parker. So that is exactly where we come to the conclusion between Betty Brant and Peter Parker. And Peter Parker knows now that there is just no chance at all for Betty Brant to love Peter Parker, because if she can't trust Peter Parker with his own job, there's just no chance that she would ever love him if she found out that he was the adventurous Spider-Man. So Peter Parker finally comes to the office of J. Jonah Jameson. He gives Jameson the photos, but before he can give Jameson the photos, he says, "Look, guy, look here, guy. You know what? I need a price here before I give them to you." So he tells Jameson that he wants $100 for each photo. Jameson's like, "You know what? Fine." So Peter Parker uses this money so that he can pay for the hospital bills. So that's pretty smart on Peter Parker's part. So here we get to the final climax, the final conclusion to this story. Is Aunt May going to make it? So Peter Parker finally arrives back to the hospital. 2 hours has elapsed here, and the doctors say that she has a fighting chance, that Aunt May is going to pull through. And while they're still talking, she mumbles here, "Peter?" And so we've come to find out that Aunt May is going to do just fine. So we have a happy ending here as we see Peter Parker finally walking off. The doctor says that Peter Parker is going to collapse if he doesn't get any rest. So Peter Parker is going to go back to his house in Queens to take a nap. And he's finally at peace knowing that Aunt May is safe. So that's the conclusion to this story. A happy ending after all. Spider-Man saves his aunt, and we come to find out that with just a little courage, with just a little willpower, Spider-Man could do it. So next issue we see right here, we're going to see the return of Kraven the Hunter, one of Spider-Man's greatest, most dangerous foes ever. He's going to return in issue number 34. So look forward to that. Go ahead, as if you haven't already, give this video a like, comment down below what you liked about this story, and I will see you next time as we look at the return of Kraven the Hunter.